What's up, coaches? Welcome to this edition of the Basic B-Ball podcast. Super excited to have our guest on today, Coach Chris Kreider at Rice University. Coach, how you doing?
Doing great, Alec. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. Appreciate you taking some time to come on. As we get going in this, just kind of wanted to first give you a minute to just introduce yourself, kind of your background and where you've been at before getting to Rice this year.
Yeah, been doing this, I guess it's 23 years, going into my 23rd season here as a coach. Similar path as you. I was a high school coach to start for 3 years, finishing up at Rice. This is my second stint at Rice, but in between I've had several different stops along the way, had the chance to work at different levels and having played at different levels too. So I kind of take pride in just seeing different levels of basketball, but then also, whether it's military school at VMI or a high academic institution like Rice, and then, seeing the ACC up close at Georgia Tech, city school, there at Georgia Tech in the middle of Atlanta, or SMU in Dallas, or Statesboro, Georgia, Georgia Southern and Georgia State in the middle of Atlanta as well. So just all over the country. Spent a couple years at George Mason as well, up in the Northeast. I'm originally from Pennsylvania. My wife is from Atlanta, so I kind of have a little bit of my home is in Pennsylvania. My second home's in Atlanta. And my wife and I and our daughter, Olivia, are now just kind of doing this coaching life, and it's taken us a lot of great places, and we've met a lot of great people along the way.
Oh, it's awesome. I love it, man. One thing I always like to talk about, like being a guy that's gone from high school into college, like what's kind of some differences, and I guess some stuff you felt like, were you a head coach there at the high school level and then kind of being in that head seat and then kind of adjusting around? What's some stuff you learned at the high school level that you've been able to bring into your experience now at the college level?
Yeah, it seems like so long ago. I mean, it's been 20 plus years, but no, I actually had a chance to do a couple different things at the high school level. Varsity assistant on the boys side, the following year, the head varsity girls coach. And then the following year, the third year, the head boys coach, all along teaching Spanish. I think you said you teach math. I think that's what it was. But so just the, coaching is teaching to me. So, just having some experience in the classroom, when it comes to your lesson plans and all that, it's the same way, your practice plans, and you try to be organized. And, there's pros and cons and differences at every level. In high school, obviously, you're dealing with some different things when it comes to potentially parents, especially at a private school or something like that, where you're dealing with parents at this level, recruiting, and it's all, connected on the court. Very similar when it comes to the basketball part. You're trying to help your players become the best they can be as basketball players. You're trying to make sure they're handling their business academically, because you're talking to them about life after basketball. At high school, they want to play in college and they want to play in the NBA, but they're kind of a step behind the guys that we have now at Rice. They're thinking, professional basketball, but then you're trying to remind all of them, high school or college, that, hey, the ball's going to stop bouncing. And so as a coach, you have to kind of, do a good job of blending all that together.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. I had a coach tell me, I think one time, he said, it's like everybody's become a taxpayer at some point, meaning like not have basketball anymore. And it's like, how are we prepping those kids to really be ready for that? Or I guess young men too, in certain situations, just be ready to just be an average Joe without that basketball bouncing, man.
For sure.
You guys heading into Rice, man, pretty much bringing your full staff. You guys said you guys kind of finally feet planted around June. What has that been like for you guys getting in there, you being your second stint there, of just kind of what are you guys trying to implement and stuff you guys are trying to do now being there for a few months?
Yeah, it's been an exciting time. There has been a level of consistency with our staff, just a lot of us knowing each other and having worked together. We've added, 2 new staff members, Nelson Taroba, head coaching experience, G League experience, really good basketball coach, and Jeff Martin from St. John's, our director of operations. So you add 2 guys to an already cohesive unit. I think that's what we have going for us here at Rice. Coach Lanier sets the culture and sets the tone with that, but we just really good people with no egos. We're all about the same thing, and we want to win. At Georgia State, when I was with him there, we went to the NCAA tournament, lost to Gonzaga in the first round. At SMU last year, we won 20 games, made it to the NIT. We were on our way to doing some really good things there, and we're trying to do the same thing here at Rice. So we're excited to be here. We think it's a great opportunity here in the American, a league that we're really familiar with from our 2 years at SMU, and just really ready to get to work.
Awesome, man. And what's your role look like heading into this year? Is it any different than what it was at SMU, or similar duties for you? But what's kind of your day-to-day look like?
Very similar, just trying to do whatever Coach Lanier throws at me. Feel like I know him a little bit just from spending 5 years with him. And then our staff, we just kind of tag team a lot of it, whether it's recruiting on the court, a lot of offense, player development, oversee some of that as well. But just trying to do my best to make everyone else's job easier in our office. Having been there before at Rice, kind of know a little bit of what it takes, whether it's in recruiting, just because I was there and made some mistakes and tried to learn from some of those, and then just try to help everybody get accustomed to life at Rice.
Nice. And then also kind of you guys, just going to keep touching on you guys just being new and getting back to Rice and things like that, is what's it look like for you guys building your culture, building that winning culture right now? And how are you guys kind of trying to implement that? I know it's early in the season, but kind of through this summer, and then what are some plans you guys have heading into the year of really just trying to build that winning culture, and some of those, I guess, key points you guys have that you're really going to hone in on for your culture?
Yeah, we actually had our first team meeting last week. We started class this past Monday, had our first team meeting, and Coach talks about, our core values a lot. I think, culture is just about how you live. And so you can say what you want, but, our players, they look at us as coaches and they want to see us model the things we're talking about. So, our three core values, humility is a big one for us, respect and responsibility. Those are the three kind of pillars for us. And an acronym that Coach Lanier picked up a couple years ago, INAM, it's not about me. And, we just try to model that, from the top down. It starts with Coach Lanier. So I think when you set that as your, culture, things you talk about, I think you play that way. Defensively, we're a defensive-minded program. For most of the year last year, we were a top 20 defense. So to rotate over and stop the ball, you need to be thinking about someone else. And then on offense, you want to make the right play and make that extra pass. You got to be thinking about somebody else. So we just try to be unselfish in everything that we do. And, just from our staff down to our players, we want them to see that emulated in us.
Nice. And that's so important in basketball, obviously. But what are some ways you guys kind of quantify that for you? It's so hard. Like, it's not about me. It's easy to say that. But there's not like it's not about me drill or anything like that. Like, love the acronym, by the way. But like, there's not I guess there's a one more drill or stuff like that. But how do you guys kind of try to really implement that? Is that just daily conversations, either one-on-one or group conversations? Or is there stuff you guys are doing in practice day to day or even in meetings that you're really trying to hammer that down?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of that. It's not just one thing. It's having a plan with how you're playing and having that reflect that. There's some, drills where you're stressing, like you said, the one mores and all that. It's defensively, when someone does their job, acknowledging it and praising it, and you always get what you emphasize as a coach. We know that. So, and then I think it's, our guys coming by the office and sitting down and talking about something besides basketball, and something organically comes up. I think it's one of those things where you can't just script it and say things. It's one of those things, you're either about it or you're not. And as much as you want to think that the players don't see when you're not, they see everything.
Yeah. And what's that look like for you guys in the recruiting process, trying to find guys like that? Is that something you guys, especially being with Coach Lanier for 5 years, is that something you guys have kind of found a formula or ish for when you're recruiting guys, really make sure they're kind of like that? Or do you guys feel like you can kind of help adjust kids to that?
Yeah, it's definitely something we look for in recruiting. Obviously at Georgia State, SMU, and now Rice, there are three different academic levels of qualities you have to have. But so I think for us, once you check the, let's just say the academic box, we have to get the transcript right away at Rice. It's almost the first thing we do. And then secondly, once we look at the kind of player that, we know what Coach Lanier is looking for from a skill set, makeup, intangible thing. We do look at the context clues. I think a lot of times when it comes to this, it's not about what they say. It's about maybe what they don't say, or it's about their body language, or, just things that come up with conversations, not just with them, but also their high school coach, AAU coach, guidance counselor, whoever it might be. So we at Rice, we view this opportunity, for these, right now it's 13 scholarships, could change next year. But it's a rare situation. You have to be a rare student athlete, a rare basketball player to be recruited by Rice. It's a top 20 academic school in the American. It's an Ivy League education combined with mid-major plus basketball. So that's a rare and unique an uncommon thing. And so we really try to lean into that in recruiting and look for guys that check those boxes and really looking for the top 1%.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. It's got to be tough to find that. It's a tough combination of things, but those kids you do find are, I'm sure, awesome for you guys. What's it kind of look like for you guys as you build your staff? You're kind of mentioning you guys have brought in some new GAs, and kind of what's it look like for you developing not only your players, but your staff as well, as you kind of bring in young guys that are not going to be necessarily helping you on the floor, but are going to be helping you on your staff?
Yeah, that's been a fun part actually of this year. At SMU, we had the chance to. We hired 2 GAs and felt like we really did a good job. And we just went through it again. And so in addition to the 2 staff members I just mentioned, we have 2 new GAs. And going through that process, the continuum of coaching, I guess, is how you think about it, where you're looking at these young guys that are just really hungry. Actually was over the phone and Zoom and stuff initially, but you try to it's almost like recruiting. You're trying to see would these guys fit on a day-to-day basis within our staff. Not only can they do the job, but would they be excited about being at Rice? And so in talking to them, it was a flashback for me, just me personally. I was a high school coach, and to get into business back when I was coming up, you had to work camps, and those are kind of extinct. So, but I did work camp at Georgia Tech. I was going for a GA spot. I didn't get it. And I basically just tried to get a volunteer spot at Georgia Tech to break into the Division I level. And just by showing up every day is how I was able to break in, and volunteered for 2 years and taught to pay the bills. And talking to our 2 GAs, I was reminded of that. And I was reminded of just maybe for them, this is their first opportunity to get to this level. They both have aspirations of coaching. And it's our job as, I don't consider myself old, but I'm with 20 years of experience, it's my job now to try to help these guys learn from things and mistakes that I made, but also do things that some people told me to do that I think paid off. So for both of these guys, I guess a couple little things, I just tried to tell them, what do you want to do? They both said they want to be in the Division I world. And I said, well, you better take this job then, because you're working for one of the best in Coach Lanier, and he really he'll let you do whatever you show you're capable of doing, and that's how you learn. And if you do a good job, he's going to help you. And so as I was talking to those 2 guys, I was just reminded of, as coaches, how we got in and what we need to do to help this next generation of coaches.
Yeah, man, it's so funny you say that, of like kind of going through the Zoom meetings and stuff like that. I almost feel like that GA spot now is it's like a recruiting process, like for you guys. And then also there's just so many people going after those either GA spots or like Dobo roles, things like that. Like it is so sought after that it's intense, just the kind of competition for it. What are some pieces of advice that you'd give them kind of beyond what you just said? You mentioned kind of trying to help them learn from mistakes you had and things like that. Is there any kind of really key pieces for a young guy, whether in a GA role, whether trying to scratch into a GA role, or even any other place, kind of entry-level role, or just even young guy in coaching? Any kind of piece of advice you have for those guys?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest, if you have options, someone gave me this advice. I had 2 options on the table, that Georgia Tech situation, which was a volunteer, and then another, it was a Division I opportunity in the Patriot League, with the pay was going to be a master's degree. But the advice was, what level do you want to be at? And whatever, the advice was, get to the highest level that you can and that you want to be at. Just get your foot in the door. And that's so true, because in my case, it was anyway. I got to Georgia Tech, and Charlton Young, everyone calls him CY, who's now at Missouri. He was an assistant at Georgia Tech, and I worked beside him for 2 years, not really knowing, that he would get a head coaching job, but he did at his alma mater, Georgia Southern. And he used to talk about all the time how interviews are really already done a lot of times. Like, when jobs come open, you can apply, but they're already pretty much filled, and the actual interview is usually done. So he had in his mind who he wanted to hire. And luckily, I was fortunate enough to be on that list just from how I operated, there in that office for 2 years. So, I didn't get paid for 2 years, basically, but it ended up being a good investment. And I think for, the advice that I got at the time, I did it, but I didn't know the value of that advice. And then I think the second part is, if you can be selective with who you work for, somebody that reflects your values. I think that's very important. And then someone that's going to help you move forward. I think there's guys that have track records of that, guys that'll pick up the phone and say, hey, you need to hire this guy. And so I think those are some good pieces of advice.
That's great. Those are perfect, man. I'm just trying to, like you said, if you can get your foot in the door, that's pretty much an interview for 2 years, even though you weren't getting paid. That's going to pay it back.
For sure.
One other thing, man, is you're talking about a little bit, or we talked before kind of about scouting reports and something coaches all have, and just hoping you kind of could dive in on that a little bit.
Yeah, I thought just something else from talking to these young guys, and then also just being out on the road recruiting and seeing old friends. And then you just, you have some time, traveling in the summer recruiting. I just thought back to, speaking of CY, he used to say this all the time, you only get one reputation. And I think as a coach, you develop a reputation. So the longer you're in it, when your name comes up, whether it's in recruiting, a kid's, dad calls around and asks about you, or, a job comes open and someone's thinking about hiring you. And it's like, immediately something's coming to mind. So I think it's up to us as coaches to protect our reputation. That's one. But then also, have a level of self-awareness. Coach Lanier has given me a lot of opportunities to grow as a coach these last couple of years. So it showed me what I don't know. And I think I'm trying to be very self-aware with things that I can improve at. So taking advantage of the off season, the spring, the summer, to get better at, whether it's the side of the ball or just whatever it is. I think some of the things I've seen, for example, that you do on Twitter where, the offense, a lot of the stuff you're posting, just studying different, whether it's actions or how people are playing, or just always trying to get better as a coach and not really accepting the scouting report, because it's kind of like for our players, we'll share with them sometimes, hey, this is what, let's say Florida State had about you on their scouting report. And then you're like, all right, you need to work on A, B, and C in the summer. Well, do we do the same thing as coaches? Probably not enough. I think we just kind of get comfortable, especially if you're with the same staff, let's say, for multiple years. It's just really staying, in the learning part, and being a lifelong learner is very important.
Oh, it's so good, man. I think that's such a good way to put it. Of like, we ask our players, man, you really got to work on your left hand and get better dribbling with your left hand. Like, are we doing that ourselves? Whatever it might be, man. Are we looking at our blob package, making sure that looks good, or whatever that might be, kind of for ourselves, for coaches. With that, you've spoken on it of like being in the game for 20 years and having a lot of experience in it, and being able to kind of reflect and address yourself. What's the value of that experience you have with being in it for as long as you have, and kind of being at different spots and being under a lot of different guys? Like, what kind of value do you feel that brings to you and what you're doing each year?
Yeah, I think there is I just heard somebody say this recently about experience, but it's not just experience, it's evaluated experience. That's really the best teacher. So you can have a lot of experience, but if you never learn from your mistakes or take anything from it, it's really not a good teacher. So evaluated experience is really the best teacher. But I do think, I had a chance to work for Dan Earl at VMI, who's now at Chattanooga, learned so much from him offensively. Paul Hewitt worked for him, learned so much about individual instruction. So my experience for these guys, I've tried to take things from each and every one that I've worked for. I try to really be diligent. I heard somebody say early in my career, you should write things down. So I started doing that, a notebook a year, just write everything down here and there when you can, whether it's a quote, a set play, a thought, whatever, and go back to it. And so I think the experience has taught me. I do remember I was young at the time. I was at Georgia Mason. It's a scouting type deal, but we were playing at Fordham. It was my scout. I think they had John Sevier, and they had another really good guard. And it was they were running just high middle pick and roll, and our coverage was such where we were getting burnt a little bit. We weren't guarding it right. And I learned early on that, but this is experience. As an assistant, it's easy to just say, hey, this isn't working. Well, the answer, we're going in, let's say we're going to hedge it. All right, well, that doesn't work. What's next? What's plan B? All right, we're going to switch it. Is that B, or is switch it C and trap it as B? So don't just state the obvious, because that's what I was doing as a young assistant. I was stating the obvious. I wasn't coming up with solutions. So my experience, I think, has taught me that I think in those moments, whether it's games or practice, not just blurting out what you're looking at and being Captain Obvious, but then also saying, what are the solutions to this problem?
No, it's such a good one, man. That's what we kind of talk to our kids about sometimes is like, are you really bringing something problem-based or is this going to be solution-based? Because problem-based, man, we all see that problem. It's like, what kind of solutions are we going to present to really help with that?
Right.
And then last thing here I was hoping to get from you is like, what's your why going into this, man? Being in it for 20 years, going from high school to college and bouncing around. I'm sure that's kind of a stress on your family. It could be good, could be bad, but it is a lot of moving and stuff like that. But what keeps you moving every single day and keeps you motivated to keep doing it?
Yeah, for me, my faith and my family are the two main things, but I think the third would be just we played, or at least I played because I love the game. And I look back on my playing career, and a lot of times the people that I've met and the people in my life came from basketball. So then when your playing career is over, it's like, okay, well, what are you passionate about? And we all choose to stay connected to this game of basketball. But I think this game can really give us a platform to impact others. So I think that would be something that I try to remember. I think that is a challenge these days. College basketball, especially at the Division I level, is becoming pretty transactional. And so, you have to maintain, being a transformational coach is something I value. And I think having the opportunity to impact others. But what does that look like? Well, you have to be creative and almost force feed ways to be impactful, I think, now more than ever. And so whether that's, helping a young man reach his dreams and playing professional basketball, that's not going to happen for everybody. But how can you maybe help them prepare for life after basketball, help connect them with somebody that can help them get a job, help them on good days, on bad days, remember that there's more to life than just basketball. So just all these things, just trying to stay balanced with the perspective. That's my why, but I do think it's more challenging now than ever, to be honest. That's just I think these last 6 months, it's been a personal challenge for me to make sure I stay grounded.
No, that's awesome, man. So well put. Of like you said, it's become so transactional, and I think I even see that at the high school level. It is too, but really just like trusting and doing what you've done your whole career of just like really pouring into these young men and really trying to help them become better young men and really prepared for, as we kind of keep referencing, of when that ball stops bouncing. It's tough, but man, keep doing it. I know you're doing a good job.
That's what it's about.
And then last thing I got for you here is a 30-second timeout. So I'm going to give you a quick end-of-game situation here and have you kind of put together a set. You all ready for that?
Let's do it.
Awesome. So your situation I'm giving you is 10 seconds left with a sideline inbound down 2. So give you a second here to draw that up, and then we'll hear from you.
Yeah, so we'll just talk it out. Side out, we're going to get the ball in bounds, and I'll just talk about, I'm going to say our, box set, zipper cut, 5, pinning down for 1, catching the ball in the middle of the floor. We're going to keep it in the middle of the floor. The inbounder, the 3, let's say, is going to get to that strong side. We'll take it out on the right sideline. So the 3 is getting right to the right corner. The 5 just pinned down. So he's in the middle of the lane. We're going to play high, middle, pick and roll. But we're going to bring the 4 is going to go to the left 45, but eventually to the corner, and basically get a ram situation going where the 2 is going to come from the left corner, and the 5, it's a ram, but it's an inverted ram. So the 5 is pinning in for a guard, and we're going to get a guard to guard blur screen, ghost screen, whatever you want to call it, for a right-handed driver going downhill, trying to get fouled, knowing that you might have a throwback if they confuse it. Most likely they're going to switch it, but just try to put our best player in the middle of the floor. If they want to try to come run and trap at him because, he's been hurting them, we're going to get to our trap spots and play through it. But I think in those situations, it's all about who's on the floor, who's been doing what in that game, what's the coverage. If you're going to go to that guard to guard, how are they going to guard it? And so I think you could do some different things out of that ram where it's, a big pinning in for a guard, but you could also just get into Spain that way. You could get into a different kind of roll and replace that way. But I'd be in the middle of the floor with my best ball handler trying to go downhill off some confusion with some guard to guard ghost blur stuff.
I love it, man. Put some pressure on the defense. Like you said, a ton of options out of that.
For sure.
Well, cool, Coach. I appreciate you taking your time again. Again, great information you're dropping, man. Appreciate you.
No, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Coach.
Yep.